You are in the ring with Héctor Colón, 7-time national boxing champion turned nonprofit president and CEO. Héctor knocks out the big issues facing social services today with high-impact leaders from around the U.S. In the Ring is a creation of Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan and is produced by No Studios. And now, here's Héctor Colón.
Hello, and welcome to In the Ring with Héctor Colón, the show that gets real about the challenges facing the social services sector and the people we serve. Here's the bottom line. Pay is not commensurate to the value our colleagues provide society. Programs and policies are not advancing quick enough in order to address the true needs of the people we serve. And the financial viability of our sector is in jeopardy. That's why this year we're going to take on these issues with people at the center of these challenges, true champions who are willing to get into the ring with me. And as my coach Shorty used to say, let's go, champ. In the ring with me today is David Duea. David, welcome. And thank you so much for being here with me today.
Hector, it is so great being here. Can't wait.
Great. David Duea is the president and CEO of Lutheran Community Services Northwest. David brings with him decades of experience serving communities across Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and has an outstanding reputation of leading innovative services that support people of all ages and backgrounds. He has led Lutheran Community Services Northwest, based in Tacoma, Washington, where they lift up the lives of 40,000 individuals each year and has done that since 2014. As the president and CEO, David has propelled programs that deliver behavioral health, child welfare, services for families, refugees, and older adults. Recently, David oversaw the agreement for Compass Housing Alliance to become an affiliate of Lutheran Community Services Northwest, and we'll get into that a little bit more into our conversation today. Prior to joining Lutheran Community Services Northwest, David led Hope Sparks, another Tacoma-based nonprofit, and he did that for 13 years. David has served in a nonprofit field since he graduated from Pacific Lutheran University in 1989, where he had a degree in social work. He has extensive experience working with board development, fundraising, and systems management. Again, welcome, David. So happy to be with you. David, I think it's fair to say that it's probably never been more difficult to be a CEO than it is today. We just experienced just recently, we experienced a pandemic, COVID. We've had the civil unrest, a lot of political polarization. People are experiencing more anxiety, depression, and addiction than we've seen in a long time. So we're really looking forward to this conversation. Are you ready?
Let's go, Hector. I'm ready.
Great. Want to start off with our workforce. We know that today voluntary turnover can range anywhere from 35 to 55%, depending on which program they're in within our sector. David, I know you've spent a lot of work on workforce challenges and issues. Can you share some of the creative ways that your organization is attracting and retaining top talent?
Yeah, Hector, it is our biggest challenge right now is workforce. We are experiencing, like you are and all of our colleagues across the country. Right now, we've got about 15% of our jobs that are open, which is a high number for us. Part of that is refilling positions where people have left, and part of that is new positions because we have new opportunities. We have more opportunities than we've ever had, but trying to find the people to fill those is our biggest challenge. So here's the creative things, and I heard one of the people I really respect talk about it's not one or two things, it's 100 little things that's going to put us over the top. One is we have a very clear home office policy. So, like everyone, we moved to hybrid work and we're not going back. I mean, some people are coming back and we have face-to-face services, but the hybrid work environment is here to stay. And those agencies that can help figure it out and clearly communicate to their staff, what their opportunities are for a home office allowance. So we will help them with equipment and setting it up and that nature. We've also embraced relocation assistance. We're recruiting people from around the country. We have an employee referral bonus. And one of the little things, it might seem little, but it's been huge to our staff, is we've been reimbursing for their credentialing, some of their the fees that they have for being, an MSW, Master's of Social Work, or other fees. We've been reimbursing those. That's been a hit. This was a long time coming, but we implemented language pay. So we have therapists that speak over 40 different languages. And they need to be compensated for that, because that's a real skill. And then our new pay plan, a very robust staff recognition program that we just reinstituted. And then I'll just say that we have been really embraced diversity, equity, inclusion at an agency and a local level. And that a lot of our prospective employees, that is critical for them coming to work with us. We also hired 2 full-time recruiters, which they're just busier than you can imagine. So
Thank you very much, David, for sharing those insights. And it's really important for us to hear those creative ways and how you've been successful, so that we can use some of those ideas as we're facing our similar challenges in our organizations. Can you talk a little bit about, those frontline workers that are doing wonderful jobs at increasing the health and well-being? How do you address pay and equity issues for those individuals? How are you doing that today?
Yeah, great question, Hector. One of the things that we did 5 years ago when we hired our first chief human resource officer, and we actually got someone from Nordstrom. She came in, and we're in 3 very large states: Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and so geographically, the spread, our pay plan got sort of off whack, and so having equity be at the forefront was really important. We had to get a system in place and a pay plan that made sense. One of the things that happened as well is that the state of Oregon passed some very strict equity laws. So luckily we were already on that path for equity and really looking at it. But Oregon sort of sped up the process for us, because legally we were bound to do it.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. It's really an important issue to make sure we're paying our staff in an equitable manner, but also more importantly, for the difference and the value they provide for the people we serve and the larger society. And I know that you are definitely committed to that. David, I want to go into, I call it equity, diversity, inclusion. You call it diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we both have had some personal criticisms of the work that we have been advancing within our respective organizations. I'm Puerto Rican, you're Norwegian, and yet we've had similar backlash in the work that we're trying to accomplish. Can you share some of those personal criticisms and how you've addressed them?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Hector. This gets personal, and it goes back. It's never been a harder time to be a leader in my profession. So you and I are called to make stands. When George Floyd happened, if we didn't say anything, that says a lot. So we had to make a statement, and proudly we did, and I know that you did, and there was some backlash from that. There's been backlash when I haven't made a statement about a particular thing. I think the important thing is that we get out there, we listen to the voices, we listen not only to our employees, but our clients. And when that backlash comes, like I'll give you a couple of examples. With some of our services, we've had a backlash of, that you're, not me personally, but our agency is based on white supremacy values or structures. And my first response 5 years ago would have been really defensive. But I've tried to do the work with my own fragility and then just instead of getting defensive, getting curious. Okay, what does that mean? And then when that happened, it was from a group of folks in one of our offices. We just went down and we like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's listen. The other example is when I had a very strong statement about George Floyd. I was accused of hating all cops. Nothing could be, I've never even thought about that. Nothing could be further from the truth. I respect the police force and stuff. And so the same thing happened with this particular individual. I was curious. I'm like, how did you come to that conclusion? And we've talked about it and really come to this fun sort of agreement that we might see things a little bit differently, but 95% we see the same.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And some very similar situations I've had at LSS. One with an individual thought that I hated all cops. And, we had a conversation, and that conversation ended in hugs and tears. Another situation I had was with a donor who asked to be taken off the donor list because he didn't like what we were saying. I met with the individual, and this was a donor that gave $100 one time. Just recently, he gave us $5,000, and he wants to continue to be a donor with LSS. So you're right on. It's just, how do we have those conversations, authentic conversations, be real, but have some empathy and respect and understand one another. In your case, it was very successful. Few situations in my case as well. So have those authentic conversations. They are really important. Okay, that brings this round to a close. In round 2, we're going to talk about behavioral health crisis in our country and how your organization is addressing these big needs. We also will touch on what you're doing to work with system leaders to ensure people are receiving a full range of services as long as they need them. Okay, are you ready for round 2?
Yeah, let's go, Hector. Ready for round 2.
Great. About 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I called our dear friend Susan Dreyfus, and I asked her, who are the best CEOs across the country that I can contact so that I can learn from them? And you were on that list, David, specifically relating to your efforts with behavioral health issues and the programs and the innovations you've had in your organization. So I wanted to touch on it. What are you doing in this space, and why is it important for you and your organization?
Yeah, great question. First of all, Susan, to put me in that list is very humbling. I might have to owe her a dinner or something, but I'm a huge fan of Susan. So behavioral health is core to what we do. It's probably about 50% of our budget right now, and it includes, in ways we've been successful. And this is what I've heard. When I was at Hope Sparks, I led a behavioral health clinic as well. Is for you to be successful in a large setting, you really have to have a niche. What are you better at than anyone else? And a few things that we do really, really well. We have a good number of therapists, as I said before, I think that speak over 40 different languages that work with our immigrant and refugee population. And so we are sought out for that. The other things we do are like sexual assault victims and victims as well. We have therapists just specifically designed for that. And then also our child welfare wraparound programs. We have therapists that are specifically designed for that. So we don't do your sort of traditional therapy much anymore, where someone will just call in and they'll have a presenting problem. We're very focused, and that has helped us grow. And as we're talking about the challenges in the country right now with division and COVID and civil unrest, we collectively as a country are not doing well. I mean, the stats for mental health, as you mentioned, depression and suicide are off the charts. So we have to respond. We have to be available. And that's where we're seeing a lot of opportunities right now, is to grow. And the question is, can we find the staff? Can we find the behavioral therapists? That's been our biggest challenge.
Right. For us as well. You know,
Mhm.
what is the larger impact you have had on the greater society through your behavioral health efforts? Have you been able to articulate that return on investment when you're able to serve them and the difference it makes in their lives?
Yeah, I'll give you one example. In Tri-Cities, which is Yakima, not Yakima, but three cities that are very close together in central Washington. So we have a wraparound program, and what we've been able to do is keep kids out of foster care and keep them out of juvenile detention, which saves I mean, we have saved that community millions of dollars. It's Kennewick, Richmond, and Pascal. We have saved them millions of dollars by those efforts, and then they keep increasing our budget just because of they understand, and we have good partnerships with the foster care system and with the juvenile detention system because they know it's like, hey, how you keep doing your work because we want to be less busy. And then so those are real numbers that can add up. The others as well, if we had time, we could go into how refugee resettlement and successful, not only resettlement and them getting a job and a house, but mentally, if they're doing well, how that just benefits the society.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. The research and the evidence is very clear that early intervention for child welfare and individuals
Mhm.
that penetrate the criminal justice system, the return on investment is totally there. Thank you for
Yep.
sharing proof of that through your uh, through your organization. How about
Mhm.
prevention programs? Do we have enough of them? And what are you doing in that space?
Yeah. No. I mean, the answer is always no. Do we have enough of them? No. We wouldn't have some of the structural problems that we have now. So no, we don't have enough of them. We do some prevention programs. I would label them more early intervention, and so most of our problems, like with our wraparound services that I will go back to, is when either the school or DSHS, which is our local, state agency for child welfare, if they identify something, they will make a recommendation into that program, and we'll immediately, through an evidence-based program, surround this family with services. It's not just the kid; it's the family. So it's those early intervention programs that we're really good at, and hoping to save time, money, but more importantly, a child, throughout the system.
Yeah, and those evidence-based programs that you mentioned is key, right? So how do we make
Yep.
sure that we're using programs that we know works and the evidence
Hmm.
shows works and across populations? So that's an important point as well. We talked about these programs, and sometimes majority of our funding comes from government. I know it does for LSS in Wisconsin, Upper Michigan, and most organizations across the country. But sometimes our government funding doesn't cover the true cost of services, and many of the services we administer are done through Medicaid. What have you,
Hmm.
which oftentimes doesn't cover the true cost, what have you
Right.
done to supplement those gaps in funding?
Well, I hear Susan Dreyfus in my ear for years is like, David, you need to advocate. You need to get more involved, and we have as an agency. So we just got about a 7% increase in Medicaid funding in the state. We One of the things I love to do is raise money. And so whether that be advocacy, we just received the resettlement agencies just received $30 million from the state of Washington and $18 million from the state of Oregon. That had to do with advocacy and partnering with our other resettlement agencies. And then there's just the ask. We are unashamed. Sometime our sector has a bit of a poverty mindset, and we don't act like the museums or great education. We just sort of ask for the scraps. We need to be done with that. What we do is so important and transformational. We need to boldly ask for large gifts, and we just received our biggest gift ever of $15 million, which was a gift to help with senior services, and that happened overnight. I worked on it for 5 years, but it felt like it, you know what I mean? It happened overnight. And then we're raising money for our refugee resettlement with the Afghans and Ukrainians. And so we just, Hector, you and I need to be bold. We need to be bold with foundations. Foundations are really helping us. We have a lot of good foundations in the Northwest, and they have been extremely generous, especially over COVID. And they've really gotten involved in the workforce issue as well. They have funded us for a position for behavioral health recruitment. And so it's been fun to partner with them as well.
David, this idea of being bold, that we should be at the table with the significant difference that we make in the lives of so many, and getting that multi-million-dollar gift. So yes, that's a very important message. Let's be more bold. And I just want to give a shout out to a few of our organizations that have been very generous with us. Bader Philanthropies, Northwestern Mutual, individuals such as Dave Berkey and John Silsath, and many others that really trust us that we are going to be good stewards of these dollars and make good use of them. So thank you for sharing that. And the message here is, let's be bold and let's raise those millions and millions of dollars. This completes round 2. Just one more round to go. Next, we're going to dig into how mergers and acquisitions can work in the social services sector, and what CEOs like us and our boards need to consider when making these important decisions. Okay, David, you ready for round 3?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Awesome. David, when you stepped in as the CEO of Lutheran Community Services Northwest, the organization organically grew from 30 million to 60 million. Congratulations for that great growth. And now with your recent acquisition, you have grown now to 80 million. Could you walk us through this growth and tell us what led you and your board to move on this recent acquisition?
Yeah, thanks, Hector. Strategically, M&A, mergers and acquisitions, is just sort of part of how you would grow an organization. The Compass Housing Alliance came 6 years ago in our strategic plan, when I went around and did a listening tour to all of our staff and asked them, hey, what is your client's biggest needs? And I'm sure it's yours too, is housing. So then we made the commitment to get into housing. We could either develop ourselves, or we could find a partner, and quickly found Compass Housing Alliance, which is another Lutheran-based organization up in Seattle, and has 4 of the major shelters up in Seattle, homeless shelters. And then also they have 16 large affordable housing complexes. And I started meeting with their CEO and just started talking and like, how do we partner? And then it quickly graduated to, I finally was bold and said, hey, I think we need to merge. And then at that time, that CEO left. And so it became more of an acquisition, or more of an affiliation model. Our missions were beautifully aligned, and our service area. And so they needed us for mental health and all of the other services we provide. And also our geographic reach. They want to grow outside of just King County, which is the Seattle area. So it was, and then a lot of due diligence to make sure it made sense.
Great. Mergers and acquisitions are really hard, just generally speaking, but even more so in our sector. Can you share with us, what do you feel went really well with the merger and acquisition?
Well, I also knew some of their board members, so we included some of their board members, which was helpful. And we didn't go in like really aggressively with this takeover, we went in with again a curious mindset. It was like, would we be better together or separate? And then we determined that ultimately we'd be better together. Now, the first year is always rocky. It's always hard because you're figuring out systems and people and everything. But I am convinced that it was a good decision. We will hope, and we won't see the fruit from it for a couple of years. The other things that gets in the way is just egos. If you've got two CEOs, it's like, well, who's going to be the surviving one? And you need to work past that, and you need to address that at the beginning, because it's not about the CEOs. It's not even about the organizations. It's about the communities we serve. And if a merger or acquisition is going to increase the effectiveness of how we help these people we serve, then we should do it.
Absolutely. Any lessons learned or maybe things you would do differently? This is a big deal. This is a $20 million acquisition and something that's not really common in our sector. What would you do differently, or any lessons learned you can share with us?
Um, I had great partners, so there's not going to be a lot of lessons learned. Our CFO had a lot of M&A experience, and that was super helpful. Um, and I think the learning is now is in how we're integrating that's where the real learning is. I think the process and we didn't acquire them. It's an affiliation. Is that I think I just think that went pretty smooth. It's just now integrating it and that it's going to be rough. You got 200-year organizations. They're 101. We're 100. And so combining them, that's going to be tough, but it's worth it. And we've got a plan. We've got a good project plan in place. And so,
Yeah, that's a very important point. That
yeah.
that integration of cultures, like you said, there's legacy,
Mm.
there's history within each of the organization. Integrating
Yep.
those cultures is key, and I hear from others that that's very important to make sure we get that right. So
It's the hardest part.
that's a great lesson, and yes,
Mm.
the hardest part. I want to.
Yep.
I interviewed Susan Dreyfus again, our friend, a couple episodes ago, and she
Hmm.
talked about how important it was when CEOs are looking to retire or move on to other
Hmm.
opportunities, that both the CEO and the board should really be thinking about what's in the best interest of that organization and that community. And sometimes it might mean not hiring that next
Right.
CEO. So I wanted to follow up to that question is, how do CEOs like you and me also consider our role in the decision making and consider what Susan shared with us, and how we move forward?
Yeah. There's a couple of things. In my case, I've structured my contract that will protect me if we have a merger and I'm not the surviving CEO. So we can sort of take my decision point off the table. And that is something proactive to do that just makes it easier. It doesn't make it easy. It just makes it easier. The other thing to do is really, and I do guest speak at a lot of boards and talk about best practices. And one of the things I tell them is it's your responsibility is not this organization. It's the people we serve and the community. So if there is that opportunity for a merger, or if you're going to be acquired, you need to look at it for what's best for your clients and your communities that you serve, not the betterment of the organization. And that's tough sometimes to hear, because we get on boards. We love I love this organization. I don't want it to go away. But if we could increase the effectiveness and what we do to serve our clients, we need to be open to that. Because I love the word you used earlier, Hector, stewardship. This is not my organization. This is not your organization. We are stewards of it. And for that, we are looking at what's best for our clients and the people we serve.
Thank you, David. I love that. And this idea of a contract where you'll be protected. But even if with that contract, you still make yourself vulnerable, and you're putting
Oh
the
yeah.
best interest of the organization. Again, you're putting the best
Yep.
interest of the community and the people we serve by having a contract like that in place. So I want to applaud you for that, for your vulnerability, and ultimately your striving to do the best thing. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that. So I have one final question that I use for all of my guests. How are you knocking out 2022, both personally as well as professionally?
All right, I'll start professionally. 2022, our strategic plan, our BHAG, our big, hairy, audacious goal is to be the employer of choice. We do a survey each year. An outside agency does an engagement survey, and we're a little above average, which isn't close to good enough. So that is how we're going to knock out 2022. That list I gave you, I'm collecting other things. How do we be the employer of choice? So that's it for this year and the next 3 years. For me personally, I am trying to find ways to, studies have shown if you have a habit where 4 hours a week, you are not thinking about work, which is hard for me, because this is a calling. But I do need that habit. And so I'm getting back into cycling and paddleboarding and just getting outside and just being as active as I can so I can turn my brain off for work so it functions better when I'm back in the office or, at home working.
Thank you, David. I like that idea, 4 hours a week where you're not thinking about work. It's sometimes so hard because everything is so interconnected with our jobs. So I might try to use that one. Thank you for offering up that advice. So that concludes our final round for today. David, you knocked it out. Thank you so much for being a guest here today. Appreciate you, my friend.
No, Hector, thank you. It's such a pleasure to talk to you always.
Thank you. There were some excellent points that David talked about that I'd like to just recap for us here today. One, he talked about workforce being our biggest challenge. And he mentioned that they had 15% of their positions were open. So they have a lot of business. They just don't have enough people to be able to address those needs within those programs. But a few things that he mentioned that could be helpful to all of us is his new home office policy where it's a hybrid, where more people are able to work home. So that flexibility, I think, is really important for us at this point in time. Relocation assistance. So getting individuals from other parts of the country is certainly something that you can do, especially in light of the fact that many of them can work from their own home. This idea of reimbursement for credentials, extra pay for individuals that have a language expertise. And also, he mentioned about just doing more staff recognition, which is really important to help retain talent. People want to feel appreciated. They want to feel recognized for the great work that they do. And also, he mentioned about, he calls it diversity, equity, and inclusion. We call it equity, diversity, and inclusion, but that's an important component of building up the right culture. He talked about having a plan around equity and pay to make sure that we're paying our staff, as much as we can and commensurate to the value that they provide. We had an interesting conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and David talked about how there were individuals that thought that they had white supremacy values or that their structures were based on white supremacy. And I really liked how he responded to that. He said, it's easy to get defensive because within your core you're not that. But how you get curious instead of defensive about those comments is what led him to good success. We talked a lot about behavioral health and how what David and his organization is doing is becoming more experts and focus on certain areas with regards to language, sexual assault, and child welfare. So he has decided in his organization to narrow their focus and being experts in those areas and then growing in those specific ways. We talked about the return on investment. It's very clear that prevention and early intervention for individuals in the child welfare system, as well as the juvenile justice system, when you provide them with services in a more proactive way, in a much more holistic way, the return on investment is extraordinary. We're talking in the millions of dollars. So it shows that it's not only the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do. Prevention, early intervention, there's not enough of it. We need to do more. We need to be advocates, advocate for better reimbursement on Medicaid, advocate for more fundraising dollars within your organization. Be bold. Our sector should be able to raise lots of money, just like the educational sectors and the universities, because we make a significant difference in the lives of the people we serve. Lots of great discussion about mergers and acquisitions. Making sure that when you move forward with mergers and acquisitions, don't lose track of that very important component. Integration is very hard, but very important to success of mergers and acquisitions. And lastly, as you're moving forward with mergers and acquisitions, it's important to not think about yourself, but to think about the community and the people you serve as the most important factor in determining how you move forward. Lastly, I love David's idea of how he wants to knock out 2022. Personally, he mentioned about trying to set aside 4 hours within the week where he doesn't think about work. David, I'm going to use that idea. Thank you for instilling your insights and your values with all of us. I know that we can learn a lot from you. Thank you, David. Next month, we're going to get into the ring with Frank Cumberbatch, who will dive deeper into philanthropy and board of director responsibilities. Frank Cumberbatch is the vice president of Bader Philanthropies, and he also is a vice president on the board of Lutheran Social Services of Wisconsin and Upper Michigan. You can find out more about In the Ring with Héctor Colón and all of our episodes on our website at lsswis.org/inthering. Let us know what you think about the show and what you want to learn about future episodes. Please like, follow, and share at LSSWIS on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any of these important and incredible conversations moving forward. All right. Thank you, David. And that concludes our show. Con mucho cariño, with much affection. Bye.